Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to our cyber threat workshop. I want to say hello to Dennis and Mike and Jacqueline who are helping out today. Where everyone's still piling in, so we're going to give it a couple minutes till we start, and then we're going to have a really good session today. Today we're going to talk about how we can create a safer internet together, because only way that we can do that is with the help of all the other organizations out there and threat hunters. So I'm going to stay with inside of the RiskIQ platform today mostly, and we're going to look at stuff so you can start training your eyes to see what is normal and what's suspicious. So then as you get experience with the information, you'll be able to help your investigations and take threat intelligence even further to find more things that are suspicious or malicious, and then apply that with inside your organization or to your investigations. So I'm just going to pop open forgot to pop open all of the different screens so I can make sure that I'm seeing everything and I can put things into the chat. So give me 1 second, one more thing coming up. Perfect. Okay, so we'll give it another couple seconds and we will start. I have some really good examples. So one of them is looking at 2 domains and looking at what's suspicious and what's normal. We'll go into looking at some ransomware and some attacks and expanding those investigations to find more bad things. I'll even have, for the people like Jupyter Notebooks, I'll even bring up a Jupyter Notebook to scale some investigations that have a lot of data so we can really pinpoint what we're looking at. And I'll have some examples inside of the code to take that huge investigation and look at like the top 100 of something in a huge list of over 300,000, just to quickly identify things that are good or bad. Okay, so we'll start. So my name is Benjamin. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Microsoft. Have lots of experience running teams, performing investigations, doing all the different aspects of IT and security. I've worked in state and local governments, San Diego International Airport, the Port of San Diego, in financial services, and manufacturing and software development. And like I always have is a picture of one of the fish I catch. So my hobby is spear fishing. But when you tell that to people in our industry, they don't take my emails anymore. So this is just a fun fact about myself and these workshops. Personally, I've gone through and trained over 10,000 analysts and growing all the time. So thank you for coming today. And if you want to talk to me, you can email me or go to LinkedIn and communicate with me. I'll turn it over to Dennis, who's helping out today.
Good morning. Dennis Mercer. I'm a retired Army Chief Warrant Officer. Spent most of my time in the Army doing defensive cyber operations. I've run NOSC. I've run threat hunt teams out of US CENTCOM. I've been in working IT for a little over 20 years, specifically in cybersecurity for a little over 15 years, and retired from the Army in 2018, and just enjoying my time now in the civilian sector.
Well, welcome. Thank you for helping today. So one lucky attendee today is going to get a $100 American Express gift card. So please stay. We'll announce the winner towards the end of our workshop today. So please ask us questions. This is live. I want to make sure that you understand what I'm saying, and if there's anything that needs further discussion, or if you want me to go off a tangent or ask a question, please do, and we'll adapt and change. So the first thing we want to do is we want to ask some poll questions, and the reason for this is as we go through and we talk about the content that we're going to go over and the use cases, I wanted to put in perspectives that is meaning to you and your organization. So if you can kick off the questions, Mike. Okay. cyber threat workshops. Have you attended one before? And the reason for that is if you haven't, I'm going to make sure that I explain more of the interface and more of the thought process behind it and how we're getting the data to make it more meaningful to you. Okay. Let's close the question and let's look at the results. Okay. So about 68% have attended before and about 32% this is your first time, so welcome. Welcome to the workshop. Okay, cybersecurity experience. How long have you been working in cybersecurity? Less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, more than 5 years, or never? Okay, so I want to make sure that the use cases that I'm doing fit the audience. So I can go into the weeds or I can stay high level. So I just want to know what level I need to stay in. And let's see. Okay, so we have 29% both for 2 and 2 to 5 years, 32% more than 5 years, and 10% never. Okay, so I'll be able to get pretty deep. Okay, and threat type. So we always try to ask this poll question. My organization is most concerned with these types of threats. So you can pick more than one. And Dennis, you want to take a guess? We always ask the guest to guess which one will be the largest number.
I'm going to go with ransomware this time.
Yes, that's usually the number one answer. Let's see if it changes.
Do I get the $100 gift card?
Potentially. Let's see. And the winner is ransomware again, followed up by nation state threats, and then tied for Hacktivision and cybercrime, brand reputation abuse, and insider threats. Okay. And Mike, is there one last question or was that the last one? Oh, we have one last one. I feel confident in spotting indicators associated with an IP or domain using RiskIQ Illuminate. So the reason why I'm asking this one is one of the exercises I'm going to go through and try to show you some stuff that on its own, it's not bad, but as you add up all these suspicious things, then you have to say, oh, this is bad. And so I want to know how comfortable you are in the product doing those types of things. And about 54% yes, and about 46 no. So I think that's going to be our first exercise that we're going to go through. And then as we go through these other exercises that are a little more advanced, we're going to apply that knowledge to it. So Mike, that's the last poll question?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So today the agenda is going to be we're going to be examining a good domain and a bad domain. And then we're going to look to see what looks normal and then what looks suspicious. And usually we say that you need about 3 points of proof to be able to really determine if something is bad. You know, one thing on its own, if it's a free certificate authority, for example, that on itself doesn't mean it's bad. But if you notice that, hey, it's a typo squatted domain, it has a free certificate authority, it's only been online for 2 days, you know, all these things start to add up that maybe it's not good and it's bad. The other exercise we're going to look at is a credential-stealing malware that happened this last week. So all of the examples I have are within the last week or two. And they were based upon threat articles that were published by us and others. So we're going to extend these investigations. So the credential stealing, they were stealing social media accounts and cookies. And as I started to look at it, I kind of figured out what they were really after. They're not really after the social media accounts, they're after something else. And as we go through the exercise, you're going to figure that out. And it was pretty cool. So I can't wait to get into that one. And then the last one is some ransomware that was just announced that nation state or threat actors in Iran were using. And the funny thing was, is as I went through and started looking at it, it was linked to some infrastructure, and that infrastructure was to a hosting provider. And then when I went to that hosting provider, there was a ton of bad stuff from a lot of different threat actors. And what you find out is that, you know, if you're look at some of the service providers that have very inexpensive or free offerings, they get abused. When you start seeing traffic from those providers, it's a huge red flag at that point. And so you're going to be able to see that and understand it when we get done. Okay. So what we're going to quickly do is I'm going to show a couple slides for the people that haven't attended before. We're going to breeze through these very quickly, and then we're going to get right into the exercises today. Okay. So when you think about security, there's two parts to the circle. Okay. There's one part, the device that's inside that you have access and control over, and that's inside your organization. And you might have endpoint protection on there that looks at like the malware, the threat intelligence, and response insights that happen. You'll find out something's bad, and you will push out, you know, protection to all of your machines in the organization. And that's the things that we do every day with like Defender, endpoint protection. Now, there's another side of the coin, and this is where RiskIQ's data comes in. So that one is based upon the internet, everything that's externally exposed outside of the organization. So think of it this way: if you're walking around the neighborhood and you're looking around, it's everything that's outside. You might see something inside of a house, but you're doing it from the outside. And so that's what RiskIQ is doing. And they're doing it as an actual user. They're interacting with the internet like you would, or like I like to say, your parents on the internet. And we're trying to find all these things and understand the relationships. And so what happens is we understand we have a single attack map of the internet. And with that, we've graphed all of the relationship, what comes in and what goes out of all the websites. So we look at the full document object model that gets created on the device when we interact with that website. So we know what's going in and what's going out. We also know about what's installed and running there. And based upon that, we're able to look at threats or vulnerabilities and be able to track not only you and others, your third parties, but those adversaries. And then with that, we're able then to push that out either with an article that with a notice to tell you about the vulnerability, or that the attack chain to show you all of the infrastructure that's involved in that particular attack or threat actor. So then you can take defensive action to block all that, or to examine that and see if anybody internally was communicating with any of that infrastructure. Okay. So the nice thing is that we all play on the same battlefield, the good people and the threat actors. So you can't avoid giving out signals. We can't, and they can't. And because of that, that allows us to really understand what's happening there. So if a threat actor decides that they're going to send out a phishing email to you, or send you a link to something malicious like malware or something, from them just getting on the internet, there's an IP address, there's a net block, a autonomous system number, and an ISP that they have to connect to. Now, when they create the email, there might be a language that they're using. Maybe they could be using, Microsoft or Google for their email, or a private email server. There'll be a subject, there'll be a body, there'll be headers inside of there. There might be attachments. There might be, HTML code in there, and there'll be a timestamp. So once we know that, we can kind of figure out where it is in the world as well. So once that email gets sent, now there's all these transit IPs and net blocks and ASNs and times. So we kind of know where it's coming from and where it went through to get to the destination. Now, when it gets received, there's a read timestamp, potentially a read notification that goes back, the server IP address that was associated with where it came in, the host name, the location of where the person was. For example, if it had like some code to geolocate where you are when you accessed it, and even the gateway IP address associated with it. Now, when it gets rendered, there could be some execution of binaries. You could have clicked on something. There might be some redirects inside of there. And then if there was a compromise, they could, scan the local network. They could run an nmap. They could potentially, do other actions and all of those techniques and procedures about them, traversing the network and scanning and dropping credentials. Those are all things that you can see and understand. Now, once it gets in the organization, that's where Sentinel and Microsoft 365 Defender can come in and help. But we're going to show you today that outside piece that most organizations don't understand that they could have complete visibility to, and understand some of these IPs and domains and the vulnerabilities that exist globally and locally to really understand what you can do. So the way that we do this is we try to do this at scale to understand what's happening and what you can do with this. So we're going out there and we're understanding the passive DNS. So those are the domains that are responding and those corresponding IP addresses. Because we have the document object model, we get the JavaScripts, the cookies, all the information about like trackers and things like that. We pull all the certificates that we come across. So you can go and search for a certificate and see everywhere in the world that it exists, or the single location where it exists. So we have all that information. We understand about the malware that's out there, the mobile apps, the banners. So we're actually checking over 200 different ports. We're grabbing those headers associated with it. So when we understand the response of what's happening and all those aspects, it gives us the ability to really understand what's happening. So we do over 2 billion web requests a day. So people have asked us, well, I can go out there and I can do a crawl and I can grab all that stuff. Yeah, but you can't do it at the scale that we've been doing it at for the amount of time that we've done it. We have it for over 11 years, this data. So we know about over 300 plus mobile stores, and we have over 34 million mobile apps in our database that we understand how those work and how they communicate. We look at many different domain resolutions and all that, but that gives us the ability that when all this stuff comes in, that we can do something about it. So think of it this way: if you had like some sort of like a SIM or alert notification system to tell you about something, if you saw something today and said, okay, I now want to be alerted if I see it again, you would create a rule, and that rule will then fire if that traffic came in. But if you wanted to go back in time, many different systems don't have that ability for you to go back in time and roll that forward. You only know from that point in time going forward, but you can't go back and roll it forward. But with RiskIQ, we can actually go back to the beginning of time that we've collected data and roll something forward. So for example, we have the cookie data set. So we did an investigation and we found out that there was a cookie that the threat actor was dropping, and this was based around Turla. So after a year of investigation and we looked at it, we closed the case, we went back and we said, you know what? There was a single indicator that every one of those infected domains and IPs had in common, which was this cookie. If we would have had this cookie, we could have potentially found all that infrastructure in a single click, a single pivot. So they went back and said, let's go back to all the data that we've collected and let's create cookies and roll it forward. And we were able to go back historically and find out all these other attacks and new infrastructure. It was amazing. So as the data comes in, we store it, and we take all the data that we had previously, and we have the ability to merge that together. When we merge it together, we can actually look for new findings. Okay, we can look for like patterns. We can create a new data set. So the data scientists work with our threat researchers, and when they come up with those ways of detections or finding something, we're able then to roll that forward, and then that becomes part of the data set. and that's part of the intelligence that we have. So we have understandings about the trackers, the little bits of code that each website might have for user experience. When the threat actor duplicates your sites, they sometimes duplicate those. We can find that type of interaction, or they might drop stuff to track you. So in the past, we've talked about some nation states that were tracking dissidents, dropping cookies, and then looking for those cookies when they went to different sites. Now, there are blacklists, there are spams, there are phishing, there are 0 days. All that type of stuff is based upon those researchers working with the data scientists to have updated information. And even our reputation scores, which are dynamic and generated based upon the information that we had that's new. So if something was infected with, let's say, malware, and it had a bad reputation, it's not like it's aged and it expires over time. But as we go back and we're rediscovering, that dynamic risk score is recalculated. So if it's no longer malicious and it's fine, as we go back, we'll show, hey, it's okay now, the score will change. So it's based upon multiple factors. So think of it like a credit score, but with all of the rule information to say why it got that score. So you're going to see that today. Okay. Now, what's really nice is that we have the ability to do what's called infrastructure chaining. And this is something that we're famous for. And this is why all the threat companies or the research companies out there like to use our data. So with a single piece of data, let's say a piece of malware, we can say, well, that malware was associated with a particular IP, and that IP address had an SSL cert with it. That cert was associated with a domain, and that domain was associated with another IP, another cert, and some trackers, and we can build out that infrastructure and say, here's the complete view and visibility of that threat based upon the infrastructure and chaining it together and showing that relationship. So that's what type of thing that we're going to try to do today, is to build those infrastructure chains to understand the complete threat, so then you can take action to either block it or mediate it, notify, write an article about it, something. So you'll be able to take action. Now, when you think about the MITRE attack matrix, what we're doing as an organization is basically in these areas. So we're doing the reconnaissance, we're going out and gathering all this data. And the reason why RiskIQ Illuminate was created was because Steve Ginty and Brandon Dixon, when they would do an investigation, it took them about 2 weeks to gather the data, all the passive DNS, all the WHOIS records, all of the other types of data, put it together, and then they could begin their investigation. So they thought, if we gather this on a daily basis and collect this, then when we had to go do an investigation, we didn't have to wait 2 weeks to have it all together and make sure it was all linked and normalized and all the connections were made. It would help us out tremendously. And it was a game changer. It's like having a SIM on the internet, that when I see one thing, I can see everything else related to it. It's incredible. So we're actually doing what a threat actor would do to fingerprint and understand an organization, but we're doing it on a daily basis for the entire IPv4 space and all the domains that are out there. And because of that, it gives us the ability to understand where things are, how they're changing, like when something was installed, when it was updated or upgraded. So we can see trends, we can see a lot of different things. Now, that's a completely outside view. Now, the inside view is what organizations generally have. They might be using tools like Sentinel, M365D, Splunk, CrowdStrike. They might be using some of those tools, but that's the inside perspective or the device perspective. And what we now have is the ability to merge those together. In the last workshop, you saw that we actually showed use cases where we started off with an incident and then enrich that with the RiskIQ information to close it immediately, or take threat intelligence that you might find, get some information, and then query that back to the inside system to understand if anybody accessed those things. And if they did, then take action and create the incident and then remediate. So today we're going to focus on more of the investigation side and creating that unique threat intelligence and understanding of that outside world, so then you can take action. So we're going to start off with our first example, examining something good and then something bad, and then trying to understand, what is that suspicious nature that we're looking at, okay? And then we'll go into the credential stealing and then the ransomware piece, okay? So before we start, I would like you to be able to log in to our environment. So I'm just going to bring up give me 1 second. I'm just going to bring up my little area here. I have, let me make sure I send this to everyone and paste this in. So this is the account credentials that we're going to be using. And let me start my slides again. And so what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be using today mostly RiskIQ Illuminate. And we might look at some screenshots of some domains to see if it was malicious or not, based upon historical data. Somebody submitted a URL and then it was scanned and the document object model was brought in, and you will be able to see an image of what it looked like. So we're going to be using that. Now, one of the disclaimers is the lawyers rule the world, and I want you to understand that everything that we're going to be looking at is bad, okay? So don't go to these domains and IP addresses directly. You want to have that air gap between you and the malicious infrastructure, okay? So we're going to be using tools that will bridge that gap, that will go out there, gather the data safely someplace else, and you'll be able to see that visual representation of that information without bringing that malicious code or content down to your machines, okay? So it's very important that you use your best judgment and understand that these things are bad, they're active, they're new, and they could potentially hurt your machines and your organization, so you don't want to go there directly. Dennis, any questions that have come up before we jump in?
Nope.
Okay.
Just one we've already answered. Thanks.
Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to look at two different domains inside of RiskIQ Illuminate. So we can either start off with the good domain or the potentially malicious domain. Okay. So the good domain is indeed.com, and the potentially malicious domain is indeedus.org. Okay. And so I'm going to paste these two things into the chat. So then we can start. Okay. And I want to make sure that everything is going fine. And give me a second. I'm just going to copy these two things and I'm going to paste it into the chat. And I will open them up. So let me fire up my browser. And let's look at these together, okay? Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make everyone's life a little bit easier. So can somebody put in there, would you like to look at the .org or the .com one first? Which one would you like to see? And the first one to answer, that's what we'll do. Okay, .org came up first.
I'm sorry, .org is
yes. Okay, so we're going to look at indeedus.org. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay, so this is the threat intel portal search page. So when I search for something, it will start looking and tell me if something's good or bad, gives me some reputation, something. But we're going to go quickly through this one and then go to the advanced search option, which we're going to look at all the data sets. And that's where I'm going to show you how to train your eyes to see what is suspicious and what's not. Okay. So if we take a look at the reputation score, it's 100. So you go, oh, that's a bad one. But we give you the reasons for it. And this is the rules that made up why this score was so high. So one of them was, hey, it's a resolving IP address. It's changing all the time. But having a dynamic IP address on the internet, that's not bad on its own. You might be using a service provider. You might be having something hosted through like an ISP where every time you reboot the machine, you get a new IP address. It's okay. But that alone isn't bad. Okay. But then you look at, hey, the registrar, maybe it's a free registrar or a cheap one. So maybe threat actors use that a lot. The name server, maybe it's a name server that has had a lot of bad stuff in there. Oh, there was an article written talking about how North Korea is attacking people using this. Okay, that right there is a red flag. And then it was on a block list. It was blocked because it's known to be bad. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little arrow here, and we're going to go into the advanced search for it. And we'll go through it again. So we still see the reputation score. Now, this other section is analyst insights. And so these were things that we had created years ago that analysts were always thinking about to say, hey, was it new? How long has it been on the internet? Does it have a change that happened with the whois information or the subdomains or the IP address? Has it been blocked? And you can see right here, it's been block listed. So all this type of information comes up. Now, the heat map, for the people that haven't seen this before, this is a 6-month window into the IP addresses. How many IP addresses we saw, and if anything changed. Now, if we take a look down below, you can see that we have 2 IP addresses listed, and my screen might look different than yours. And the reason for that is that if we take a look, if I go into the account settings and I go into, I'll scroll down here to sources, what you'll see is I might have things enabled that you don't. So what happens is when I do a search, I have a free account on hybrid analysis. So it's going to go out and search hybrid analysis for that IP or domain or MD5 hash, for example, and bring that data in, virus total, mnemonic, alien vault. So these are all the things that I've enabled in my screen that now give me that visibility inside them. So if we take a look at this graph up here, that little tiny triangle in the upper right-hand corner means, hey, something new was seen on the day. And because it's the first day, that's why we see that. Now, the curve on the bottom, okay, means that that's the end of a month, and the curve on the top is the beginning of a month. Now, if I select one square, it will actually show me just that 1 day's worth of data, or I can hold the shift key down and choose a larger area and see that range of time. And this is very handy because, you know, as threat investigators, we're never told that the attack's happening right now. It's always, oh, this attack happened yesterday or 2 weeks ago. Go figure this out. So this gives us the ability to filter the data to show me how it looked like at that time. Now, I can just refresh the screen, or I can choose a different area. So like when we get into sites that have more than 6 months worth of time, you'll start seeing a data bar below this show up that shows all the data that we've ever collected on it, okay? So let's take a look down below and start looking to see what we see. So we see Namecheap Inc. So that's the registrar. So that's a lot of threat actors like to use. They like to save their dollars and do things for free or the least amount of money they would have to spend. So we see a lot of things happening from here. You'll see that it's been blocklisted by RiskIQ and it's associated with malware. Okay. Now, let's look at the whois data. So if we take a look at the whois data, it's privacy protected. So that's because of GDPR. But as time, if a site has been around for a long time prior to GDPR, and you have a licensed version of Illuminate, you'll be able to see that history that we've collected over the years. So you can actually go back way back in time and see who owned that domain and how it's changed over time and how it got into privacy protection. So you can see right here, it's in Reykjavik, okay? So even though it is privacy protected, indeedus.org is in Reykjavik. That's suspicious, okay? So now I have a suspicious indicator, even though it's GDPR has basically made everything that I don't really see who really owns it, okay? So now let's look at the certificate. So if we take a look at the certificate, let's see what else. Okay. Okay. So this is a paid certificate. Okay. Okay. It's in Greater Manchester. Okay. So nothing, no red flag here yet. Let's look at the subdomains. So Indeed us.org, there's only 2 subdomains. Okay. So it's not really, maybe Indeed only has 2 subdomains. I doubt it, but maybe. Okay. So could be suspicious, but maybe not. Okay. Let's look at the trackers. A single tracker. A Google Tag Manager ID. I would think they would have more. Indeed might have like many different types of trackers because they might be publishing in many different places. So I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to open another tab. If I just click on it, it will take me there. But what I like to do is think of it like I'm on the trunk of a tree and there's branches going off. If I go down a branch and the branch ends, I want to be able to go back to the trunk quickly without having to go back, or lose that part of my investigation. I like to open up another tab and then I can save all the tabs into a folder, and that preserves my investigation. Okay. So that's the way I like to do it. So I'm going to open this up in another tab. So let's take a look at what this goes to. Oh, so that suspicious domain, indeedus.org, is using Indeed.com's Google Tag Manager ID. And if you notice, Indeed.com has all these subdomains, all these different subdomains in here. Okay, and there's 96 of them associated with this particular one. And you see a first and a last seen. So we know the first time we saw this Google Tag Manager ID and the last time that we saw it. Okay. Okay. So we're going to go back to the previous tab. So that right there is a red flag that Indeedus.org is using www.indeed.com's Google Tag Manager ID. Okay. So let's look at the components. Only 14 components. Okay. It's running Apache. It's a Windows 64 operating system. Okay. Just a few things, not much. And generally you would see if a large organization like Indeed.com might have, hundreds of components running because they're running many different things for different visualizations for different types of devices. They might be having many different subdomains going back to the main server. So the number of components looks kind of weird. Okay, so let's take a look at the host pairs. So the host pairs, remember, if I visit a website, it's pulling that document object model. And because of that, it knows what comes in and what goes out. So for example, you're sending Google Analytics out on the user experience from the client perspective, and you're bringing in some images from somewhere or other things. So let's take a look at this. So they're doing a scorecard research, Datadog HQ browser agent. Here's the Google Analytics, some CloudFront stuff. Okay, all right. So nothing tying back to Indeed.com. Okay, so I would have to look to see what else, but it's running a lot of scripts from these places. Okay, so let's look at the open source intelligence. So think of this as a search, like a search with with Bing or something, where it's just security type of sites. And if you notice in here, you can start seeing all of these different people that wrote articles about this particular domain, and some of the deciphering North Korean actors' exploitation of Indeed.com. So there's a lot of different things in here. Okay. Now, there hasn't been any hashes, but let's take a look at the DNS. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to mention to you, if you look at the resolutions here, I'll go back real quick and I'm going to show you the legend. Okay, if it's blue, it means it's routable. It's a routable IP address. And that's what you expect to see on the internet. But However, if something was that dark gray color, okay, that means that it is non-routable. And if you're thinking, no, you can't see non-routable IP addresses. Those are going to be dropped on the internet. You won't see those. You're absolutely right, but we can detect them. And you're thinking, well, how can you detect something that's not routable? It's not going to be seen on the internet. So what happens is we go to the name servers. So for example, in the whois record, if you take a look, there's some name servers here. We go pull all the records from the name server. So if somebody is going to do something bad, for example, they might stage it. They might have it in the name server and it's associated with a loopback address. Okay, so they can only access it from the machine, but they put it in the name server to get it ready to go live. Then they'll give it a public IP in the name server, and then people will get to it and do it, and they might switch it back. So if that ever occurs, you're going to see a green color if it happens on the same day. But we have to see it. So like if a tree falls in the woods, we hear it. Well, only if you're collecting data. So for example, if a site was online and we scanned it and it was fine, but then it became malicious and we didn't scan it and went back, we would never know. So it's only as good as the your scanning or your discovery frequency to be able to know if something's good or bad. So if somebody is patching, we might see it's vulnerable today, and then 3 days later, as we scan it again, it's patched. We're gonna say, okay, it's been fixed as of this day when we saw it. So just bear that in mind, that we're finding this information from those name servers. So if we take a look at the DNS entries, so that resolutions are all the A records, okay? And then the DNS is all of the other records that are in here. So as we go through, we can actually pivot on these things and search to see what other domains are using those or what other information that we got from some of these. So if I went to the name server and I open that up in another tab, that will give me the information of all of the records that I saw, all the IP addresses, all the reverse DNS entries that I saw there. So this is how we start to piece some of that together, okay? And I'll go back to the indeed.org, okay? So that gives you the capability of understanding what's happening. Now, the other thing is threat actors might limit the amount of IP addresses that they're advertising for this domain because they don't want to burn up their whole range potentially. So you might see some records in here that are going to that you can pivot on to see, oh, it's in the subnet. So maybe you might want to go start looking at some IP addresses above and below that just to try to see potentially if there's any overlap. Like there might have some other bad stuff that's out there, okay? And then cookies. Okay, so the cookies might be something that you can search for and find other sites that have it. In this particular case, it's only going to link us back to this particular domain. So these are some of the things that popped up that are suspicious. So for example, if we look at the resolutions, we can say, okay, where in the world is this? USA, SFO, and then we have these ranges. So that's the US, there's nothing there, but the whois information, it's not in the US, it's in a foreign country. So that gives me some thoughts for it. The subdomains, there's only 2, there's only 1 tracker, there was only 14 components. So now let's look at indeed.com, okay? So I'm gonna open up another tab. And we are going to look at indeed.com. Okay. So are there any questions that have come in so far that we should hit? Okay.
No,
Dennis,
sorry, I'm trying to get that mute button to come off. No.
Okay, perfect.
No, we're good.
Okay, so when I run this query, I'm seeing data that you might not see. So for example, I'm seeing that, hey, Indeed.com is part of Indeed Incorporated. And that's because my account has elevated privilege that I can see the third parties, but not just the third parties that are associated with my account. I see them all because my org sees all the different ones that are out there. Okay, so that's why I'm seeing this. You might not see it in yours. The reputation, it's a resolving IP address, but that's just says that has a yellow on it because that alone doesn't make it malicious. Okay, but now let's go look at it. So I'm going to click on that little arrow and it's going to take me over. And now let's start looking at stuff and see what's happening. So Mark Monitor is watching their DNS thing, their brand, okay, their domain, okay, and it's been around since 2010. It just hasn't been around for a few days, okay. If we take a look, you can see that there's many different IP addresses associated with it, going back very far in time. And remember, I told you that if there was more than 6 months worth of data, I can go pick a different part of time. And when I click on it, it will refresh it and show me that data during that 6-month window of time. And then I can either go back and click at the very end, or I can hit refresh and it will take it back and show me the current last 6 months worth of data, okay? And so if you look, you can see first and last seen, like these IP addresses were first seen. So you can see how things are changing over time, okay? Now, if we take a look down below and I start looking at these things, so Amazon, SoftLayer, SoftLayer, so Amazon and SoftLayer, we see those IP addresses, okay? And you can see it's tons and tons of information, not just one IP address associated with it. Let's look at the WHOIS records, okay? So right now, Mark monitors their registrar and monitoring and taking everything. Now it's associated with Indeed.com, okay? But if I go back to the first record, okay, I can actually go in and see their address, and this is them. So I can say, okay, I know it's them. Okay, so this is how it looked like prior to GDPR. But then over the years, and as those things happen, you can start to see that they were taken out of the WHOIS record until we get to the way it looks like today, okay? Now, if I look at the certificates, we had what? One certificate, one or two certificates, and now we have 471 certificates. And you can see that they're all associated with different alternative names as well. And it's from Amazon, okay? And let's see if there's one from, is there one from SoftLayer as well? And indeed, in Austin, Texas. Okay, so you can understand now that this is how a big domain looks like. It's also Alexa top 10,000 listed. And let's look at the subdomains. So instead of 2 subdomains, I now see 5,000 subdomains. So if we take a look in here, 1-800-Flowers must be using them, okay? And if I expand this out to be 500, you'll start seeing patterns. So St. Joseph's, okay, all these different IPs. And basically, different organizations might have a specialized domain for them. Okay, so now we understand Norton antivirus. Okay, so all these different things for subdomains. Okay, now trackers. We had one tracker on the other one. Now I have 20,000 trackers in here. Okay, Twitter ID, Facebook ID, LinkedIn ID, YouTube ID, Google Tag Manager IDs, and there are 3 different ones that show up. And then some other ones optimize the IDs. So you can now understand what type of stuff you should be seeing. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the components, the other one I had 14 components. Here I have 2 million components. Okay. So quite a big difference. Okay. Inside of here, Palo Alto, Global Protect, F5 Big IP, Soft Rack Space. And you can see like when things are changing, like if they change their infrastructure or anything, you would start to see that. Subscriptions, Norton antivirus. So somebody's asking, hey, why do we see some of those things as marked as malicious? It might be that there might have been one of the subdomains or something that was compromised, and maybe something bad happened with it. That's why we might see something malicious inside there. So if secure.indeed.com, let's say somebody broke in and added a record to their company for secure.indeed.com, for example. I don't know if this happened, but that's potential that somebody can go and add a record that you don't know to and link it to a different IP address someplace else. So if I right click and went there, let's take a quick look. And it doesn't really tell me anything inside there. Let's look at the open source intelligence. No, so they could have been just something that something happened. So I don't know exactly why that is, but potentially it could be that something was bad on at one point with one of those trackers, or some bad person used that tracker on another site, and maybe that got linked to something that was bad. And then they changed their ID, but because it's still there, it might be listed. That's another reason something can happen. Okay. Hope that answers it. And then if we take a look at the components that are listed here, the host pairs that are listed here, this is the relationship of what goes in and what goes out. And there's 255,000 different things here. So you can understand that companies might be linking in and grabbing data, or they might be pulling content from other places based upon countries or maybe rules that are applied in other countries. So you can see all of this type of stuff. So this is what we expect. And you can see redirects and images and different things. So the amount that's listed here is crazy. Now, you might see hashes here. And some people are thinking, wow, do they have bad stuff here? Not necessarily. So let's say I have an email gateway and somebody had sent some malware to Indeed.com, and they took it and they checked it and they reported it as, hey, this had malware. It might be linked back to them to say, oh, it was associated with them, but it doesn't mean that they were hosting it. It could, but it doesn't mean that it is. So by looking at these hashes in here, just might be that Indeed.com might have received it, or somebody had that in that URL or in that email when they looked at it. So it might be associated with them. So I don't really consider that to be something that's bad. That could be suspicious, but happens to every organization. They're going to have, tons of stuff in hashes potentially if they have systems to monitor that. Now the DNS entries, let's take a look in here. So they have all of the stuff to securely do their mail, their start of authorities, their MX records, their name servers, the canonical names that are in here. Okay, so everything looks good so far. And then all the reverse DNS entries associated with their IP addresses. And if you notice, they're all Indeed.com or direct host that they're using. And this is probably some stuff that's inside of Amazon or something. Okay. Any questions on what we've covered so far? And the cookies, there's 73,000 cookies. Okay. Quite a difference. Okay. So these are the type of things that you can, when you start to look at stuff and you look at the age of a domain, you start looking at all those other things. That's when you start to see what's good and what's bad. So when we look at this, resolutions, the bad website had 2 resolutions only. It was up for a shorter period of time, just for like a month or two. Indeed.com had 518. There was one who has record where Indeed, because of their time and how GDPR changed over time, there were 8 different records. Not one record, but 468 certificates in there. 2 subdomains compared to over 5,000. 1 tracker compared to over 20,000, 14 components compared to 463,000, 10 host pairs compared to 168,000. The open source intelligence articles, about the same. The hashes, there were hashes associated with Indeed because they're actually checking their mail, for example, and finding threats and dealing with them. DNS entries were about, there were more associated with Indeed. There were more IPs, so there were more reverse DNS entries, and cookies, not 8, but 72,000 cookies, okay? So, and the open source intelligence article talked about North Korea using this domain for attacks. So those are all things that come into your information to look at what is suspicious and what's malicious, okay? So this is just a way of seeing what's good and what's bad, and what things you can start to see these patterns and go, oh, that doesn't mean it's bad, but that's kind of suspicious. So, but once I get 2 or 3, once I get 3 or more, that means that something is really probably bad, okay? So looking at, the trackers, the components, the certificate, the who is record, all those things start to say, hey, this is suspicious. It's probably not good, okay? So the next use case that we're going to do is more of an advanced use case. And I read this article and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And the article, and we're going to get into it in just a second. And I'm going to give you all of the URLs that I'm using for my pivots. I'm going to copy them and paste them into the chat. Or Dennis, can you do that for me if you have a second? So then everyone has these. So this one was talking about credential stealing, where malware was designed to steal credentials and cookies. And you're thinking, who cares about cookies? If someone's stealing my cookies, who cares? But when you think about it, when you go to domains and you've done that multi-factor authentication, it sometimes will ask you, hey, do you want to approve this device? So then you don't have to do this again. And all of us say, yes, I don't want to have to go through the 2-factor piece. Yeah, just save something on my machine. It's a cookie. So then when I go back to the website and I use my credential, it says, oh, I've already checked your device. Therefore, you're okay to come in. I don't have to do that 2-factor, okay? So threat actors have got smart now to say, I don't no longer just need your credential. I need the cookies associated with it too. So then when I present it, the site will check for the cookie. And when they check for the cookie, it's the one that matches that credential. So now I'm allowed in with no 2-factor. Okay. So they got smart. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this. We're going to do some analysis. And then we're going to see, are they just after your social media credentials, or is there something else that they're after? Okay. And it's pretty cool once we see it. And then once we know what they're after, we're going to go to that real site and we're going to find all the bad things associated with the real site. Okay. So give me a quick second. And Indeed. So this one is here. Okay. I'm going to paste them all in for you. Okay. So let me bring that up and we will start. Okay. So I came across this article. It was just written a few days ago. I'll just let it load and then we'll go through it. So I always try to pick things that are relevant and allow you to use your mind to figure out additional things, okay? So there was this article that was published talking about, and this was just on the 11th, and today is the 14th, so not that many days ago. And this article talked about how this attack was basically, downloading, stealing your credentials and your cookies, and it was dealing with Telegram. Okay, so inside of here, it mentioned a domain. Let me go into the public indicators. Where was it? Oh, IP address. There was an IP address associated with it. Okay. So this IP address, okay, I right click and opened it up in another tab. Okay. That's this IP address. So once I looked at this IP address, I tried to figure out, more about what this infrastructure was. Okay. So let's take a look at the domain names associated with this IP address. And I'm like, oh, so whenever I see something with an XN dash dash, does anybody know what that flags in your mind? Okay, somebody put something in there. No. Okay, I think of puny code. Does anybody know what a puny code is? Yes or no? No. Okay. So think of it this way. I can make a domain look like a real domain name, but I can use characters that are not in the English language. They have the accent marks and things. So they're like foreign language characters. But when you look at it, you might not know it's bad because it has these foreign characters in there. Okay. But when it comes in, it has to be translated from that foreign characters to something that is machine readable. Okay. And that's where they get these things. So let's take this first one. I'm going to copy this. Okay. And in that list, okay, I'm going to copy this name. There was a link to a puny code translator. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to paste this one into the link for everyone. Cyrillic characters, yes. Okay, so here we go, and I'm going to copy that first one. Okay, and let's go back to the puny code thing, and if I paste it in here and I say convert, trustwallet.com. Going, so now that I know that puny code was trustwallet.com, if I go look at this name now, oh, this is kind of like trustwallet.com. This is kind of like trustwallet.com. But if you notice, these were August. Okay, some of these were created in August. Some were stopped. But like if I go down here, there's other ones. So let's take a look at this one. Okay. So if I go here and you notice that, well, how the accent smart looks, like what angle they're looking at, like the lines. If I do this next one and I convert it, oh, it has an O over the U. Okay, so these are all different character swaps. But if you looked at it, you go, oh yeah, it's Trust Wallet. So now I know that, hey, that IP address that's known bad was doing something with Trust Wallet. So I didn't know what Trust Wallet was. So I went out and I searched on Google, and then I clicked on it. I didn't go there directly because I didn't want to get, potentially get something, but trustwallet.com, it's like Coinbase, but it's big in Europe. So this is your crypto wallet. Okay. So think of it this way. If I can dump your credentials and your cookies, especially, ones that might be linked to like social or something. So like if I had like Facebook, for example, I might use Facebook to authenticate me to other sites. So if I can successfully log into Facebook, then when I go to these other sites, it might just allow me to get in because it knows who I am because I'm using that single sign-on for Facebook. So that might be one aspect, or they're just trying to steal credentials so then they can steal things to get into my crypto wallet. So I went through and I said, okay, if that threat actor was potentially all of those things were Trust Wallet, let me look at Trust Wallet and see if I see any tie back to Telegram, okay, the social media thing. So that was in the article, talked about, Telegram, okay. So one of these articles, the other one might be this one, talked about it was Telegram, okay, Telegram service, okay. So if I went through and I looked at trustwallet.com, so just going to copy this and I'll show you from here. It's like how it would look like if I started from the main interface. Okay, so I look at Trust Wallet. Okay, and if I click on this, it would take me to this view. Okay, so now that I'm here, I want to look for any type of tracker that might be associated with Telegram. And I want to do a search on that to see if I see anything that might be unusual. Okay, so let's go look at trackers. And when I look at the trackers, you'll see Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Instagram, there's Telegram user ID. Oh, trust announcements. Okay, so let me see if there's any tie-in between trustwallet.com and anything that might be associated bad with the Telegram user ID trust announcements. So if you right click on this and you open that up in another tab, you'll start to see a lot of things listed. Over 2,000, okay? And then there's over 1,000 IP address. So what I like to do is I want to do some spot checks and start going through this list to see, hey, is there anything bad that's associated with it? So right away, I see something with a .tk. If I see a .tk, me right away says that is malicious. Okay, it's a free certificate. It's a free domain. You can get a free domain there. Threat actors know it, and so they get them all the time. So it's just from experience, I know that, hey, if I see a .tk, probably 99.999999993, it's bad, okay? So if I open this up another tab, okay? Let's take a look. The Freedom Registry, okay? Just because of the name server and the TLD, the .tk, it says, hey, it's probably malicious because we've seen so many things from there. And if we notice, it's only up for 2 days and it's not up anymore. So it was only up for 2 days, okay? Who is data? Okay. Nothing. Okay. No certificate, 2 subdomains, 9 trackers. And if we look at these trackers, they're all Trust Wallet's trackers. So something duplicated their site. Okay. And that's about it. So now I want to try to see, how does it look like? Is it really malicious or not? Because it's no longer up. I can't visit it. So I can use something like URL scan.io to go look at the image to see if it's there. So I'm going to open this up in another tab and I'll go to URL scan.io. Okay. And from that, I am going to look for this domain. So instead of scanning it, I'm going to go to search and I'm going to see if there's any entries for this. So let's take a look. Oh, there was one a day ago. Let's take a look. Oh, look, a nice picture of the real website. And they've labeled it from Google Safe Browsing. Hey, it's malicious. Huh. So now I'm going through going, how many more? So can somebody, try another one, do this type of thing that I just showed you where you can go look at the domain and then go to URL scan.io and see if you can find another bad one from the list. Let's try. You find one. If you find one, put the name. You don't have to add the domain at the end, but just put don't put the TLD or put little brackets around it to defang it so no one will click on it by accident and go there. But try to put one in. Okay. So I'm going to go back and I have this nice thing that keeps on coming down and it's my little toolbar I'm going to move it to another screen. Okay. So I'm going back to the list, and let me try this one. Okay. So let me copy this, and I'm going to right click and go to another screen. Resolving IP block listed. Okay. It's only been up for 3 days. Okay. It's in the Netherlands. Okay. And I'm going to do a search for it. And let's see. Oh, 12 hours ago. And there it is. Another malicious one. Okay. Yep. So as I went through and started to look at this list of bad things, I went through and I said, wow, if I can find, really quick, I can start to see a lot of these are bad. And I was surprised to see, and there's 1,900 listed. So at which point I started to look and say, well, I can go individually through these to look at them, but how can I scale this? How can I make it even better? So I can make this in such a way that I can do a lot of them at once, get the reputation of them, for example, and see if they're good or bad. Because you notice that, when we start looking at these in the reputation, it goes, hey, it's blocked. Hey, it's suspicious. So it has a high score. It's almost to 100. Okay. It's associated with a bad IP address. Okay. That we know that something malicious was happening there. Okay. And it's also doing SSH fingerprinting as well. So I created a notebook, and in that notebook, let me go in and show you. Okay. So what I did is I'm going to make sure that this notebook, we're going to put it online. So when we send out the link to the recording, you'll get a copy of this notebook. Okay. So you'll have this. So if you're into Jupyter notebooks, this is using our analyzer, the passive total analyzer, to go through and do this. So what I did was I said, I want 10,000 rows maximum to display. I want to be able to create a pivot table. I created a pivot table to be able to link these together and see. I went through and looked for trustwallet.com, and I said, just go back 3 days because there's so much data in there. I said, just show me 3 days worth of data. Okay. And look for this Telegram user ID. Okay. And if you notice, here it is. And then using that ID, that value, I said, go and find all of the domains associated with that Telegram user ID. And that's what this data is here. Okay. Then I get this nice list because I put it into a Panda data frame. Okay. And then I went through and said, okay, I'm going to drop all the duplicates. So I only have a single list. And there's 1921 list of entries. Okay. So quite a few. Okay. So even though I went back just 3 days worth of data, that entire list was there. So there's a lot of stuff happening around that. So there's probably some sort of attack focused around that Telegram piece that article talked about, that's trying every which way possible to get people's money. Okay. So I went through and said, go through and tell me if you know if it's already suspicious or malicious based on RiskIQ's data. Okay. And the ones that are unknown, we can actually go out and look at those and do a check to say, hey, did somebody else notify us that it's malicious? It could have been that no one's received an email. It could be still in the setup and weaponization, or that information hasn't flown into RiskIQ's knowledge from Microsoft or others to be able to let us know about that particular case. But if you notice in here, trustwallet.com is listed because I didn't remove it from the list. And that one's shown up as an unknown because there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. There's nothing, we don't know anything bad about it. Okay. But there was a few other ones that are suspicious. So like if I took this one, for example, and we went in and let's take a look and do a search. and see if anybody submitted anything on this one. 3 months ago. So 3 months ago, hey, it's malicious. Okay. So let's find one that is unknown. Let's find this. We can try this one. And let's try one more. Nope, nothing. Let's see if there's anything there. Let's take a look. But this is the cool thing, that from this investigation, when you look at, hey, it's doing Telegram stuff. Well, who cares? You got my social media. I don't really care. But then when you find out, oh, they're grabbing the cookies and the credentials, they could get into any sites potentially. And what are they really after? Oh, it's tied to Telegram. Oh, the Telegram user ID associated with Trust Wallet probably. And you see all those attacks happening against Trust Wallet. Hey, and this one's suspended. So it redirected to a suspended website. So yeah, this is probably bad too. So this now, they're probably trying to steal people's money from their wallets. So that's the ultimate goal, is a money theft of cryptocurrency. So as we go through, I'll just go quickly down. I looked at 100. I told it to only look at 100 sites because I didn't want it to take too long to be able to do it. So it's only applying it to 100 things. Out of 100, the average was a 48. So they're almost all suspicious. Okay. So that's what I had in here. And then I even was going to do a pivot table and like be able to show like which ones were bad or which ones were good. But when I looked at the data, most of them were suspicious or malicious. And the ones that were unknown, when I went and did the spot checks, like 80% of them were bad. So this attack is really going after money. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to close these out. And we'll go back to the slides, and then we'll go into the next exercise. Okay. Okay, so from here we found out all the puny code ones, and then I made a nice table to show you all of the different Cyrillic type of characters that were used for this Trust Wallet attack. So you can see all the different permutations of the different characters that were part of these puny code references. And when I looked at it, it was like, oh, it's this way, the line. Oh, okay, 2 dots, a circle, you know, a U. I don't know all these accent marks mean, but I was like impressed. I'm like, oh, wow. It's like every type you can imagine. So over 1,900 records, and going back 3 days, it was all of them. So it was quite a few, and it was pretty big. Okay, so the next one is, I want to look at this attack, but I want to focus on the threat actor infrastructure. And from this infrastructure, I want to look, does this threat actor, you know, are they congregating with other threat actors? So what we're finding is that some bulletproof hosting providers, these are hosting providers that might be paid in cryptocurrency because they're stealing a lot of cryptocurrency. It's not traceable for them to like get caught. So threat actors and nation state actors are using those types of things. They're using these services where they're saying, we're not going to take you down. We're in an area we're in a country where we're not going to respond to takedown requests, or we're going to also have DDoS protection. We're going to keep your site up, So if someone tries to take you down by an attack, we'll protect it and we'll have it there. And then we want to look at a service provider that maybe is doing this and then see what other threat actors are associated with that service provider. And we have that ability through the attack surface to be able to say, let's look at a bad site, who's hosting it, then look at that hosting provider. And from that hosting provider, we can drill in to see what's happening. And it could be that the hosting provider has infrastructure that they don't care is patched or not. So if something is susceptible to an attack or it's vulnerable to attack, and threat actors know that, they can go exploit those things and take them over and use them. Or it could be that the threat actors are just purchasing services from them and using them. So there's a lot of different things, but what we'll find is that there's the threat actors like to hang out together, and we're going to go through that. So we're going to look at a domain that came up through this one attack, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the next set of domains we're going to look at. And I'm going to paste it in, and then we're going to go through these, okay? And I will stop showing my screen, and we will go back to here. So this EvilNominatus Ransomware, okay? Clear Sky reported about, okay? And this was from, uploaded to VirusTotal from Iran that originally saw this. So I wanted to go through and try to look to see, could I find anything else about this? Is there any other infrastructure? And if you notice, there was no RiskIQ indicators here. So no threat analyst had looked at this from RiskIQ to add more information in here. But I want to show you that you can take any intelligence, any article, ours or others, and go and look at that and probably find more stuff, because once it's published, those threat actors change, but they always leave breadcrumbs linking it to other stuff because of the infrastructure chaining that you might be able to find something new. So if RiskIQ put information in here, you can look at that and say, what's the date? Okay, as of this date, new things have been added, but you might be able to find some more if you look at it again. And so that's why I like to use those Jupyter notebooks, because I can always rerun that notebook and get more information. So I can tell it, instead of going back 3 days, if I run it again 3 days from now, I can see the last 3 days. So I can see if anything's changed, if anything new is happened. Things might have dropped from the previous investigation. So we're going to look at this. And I looked at this article. So I opened this up in another tab. And in here was a document. So I opened that document. And so here we are. So I wanted to take a look to see any indicators in here. And these are in the article, but I wanted to look from the original source. So I do a Command F, and I look for this I love you, because it was a .com I looked at. So if you notice, it's this 000 web host app.com. So I went, oh, okay, I've seen that before, because I've come across some threat actors leveraging that domain. So I wanted to go through and take a look at that. So if I looked at this domain, okay, that becomes this query here. And I'll copy and paste it in, even though it's in the list, just so you have it. So you have this particular one. So inside of here, what we've done is we've said, hey, it's malicious for sure, because it was in the article. Okay, it's associated, in that article, it's actually listed. Okay, so it's a direct match. We looked at the original source, we pulled out those indicators that might have been images or in the PDF, and we've made them part of the article. So it's very easy to do that match. Okay, so if I click on this, I can get into the advanced search. Okay, so when we look at this, it hasn't been up for that many days. Okay, it was very short amount of time. Okay, but you can notice the amount of IP addresses have changed dramatically over that. Okay, and these are all in the Netherlands. Okay, so this is something that's being hosted out of the Netherlands at Hostinger. Okay, so I'm going, okay, let's see what I can find out about it. So who is records? There's 9 of them. Okay, so right now GDPR masked, Okay. But as I go back in time, we'll start to see that Cancun, Jalisco, it's all in Mexico. Okay, so it changes locations, this one. Okay, so kind of weird. Okay, and the email address is associated with it. You can see over time, the different registrars, it's the same one. The different name servers, okay, phone numbers associated with it, okay, and it's associated with the hosting provider. So that domain is probably like a free domain that you can spin up, and you have their end on the part of your domain. So you're making a subdomain off of theirs, for example, or a dynamic DNS from them. Okay, so I wanted to go through and see, what could I find with this? Okay, so as I went through and I looked at this, there was a tracker in here, and I said, okay, there's a Google account number and a Google Analytic tracking ID. And I said, okay, I only see one. If I pivot on this, and I pivoted on the account number. So I right-clicked and went to this one, okay? And just like we did on the Telegram tracker, okay, I started looking at this and I said, hey, I see one that's a phish, okay? I see one that's blacklisted. And I converted this to say, show me 500. And as I started to go through this list, a majority of them were bad. And so I was like, wow, that's crazy. So as I started to go through, you can start seeing phishing, blocked, more phish. So I started to see this pattern going, why is that? Why are these, this TLD, this domain, having so many bad things? I'm going, I didn't know about this provider. So I said, okay, let me go see what I can do. So then I did a search just on that domain. Okay, so I went through and I searched on this domain. So once I searched on this domain, the reputation is, it was associated with another article. Oh, what wicked webs we weave. And I'm like, okay, what's this one? Okay. So then when I looked at this one, this was back in January. South Korea online platform. It's with Wizard Spider. Oh, a Russian-based financially motivated threat actor. I'm like, oh, wow. So now I have an Iranian threat actor and I have a Russian threat actor. And I'm like, ooh, okay. So I have two different countries using the same infrastructure. Well, what can, and most of those domains listed were associated with bad stuff. And I'm going, why is that? So I did a search for that hosting provider, and I found out that, oh, it's an international hosting provider established in 2004, Lithuania headquarters. And I'm going, okay, well, what's about it? Oh, web hosting for $2.99 a month. Going, oh, let's look at the pricing. So when I look at the pricing, I can see I can get 100 websites for $5 a month. 200 gigs, unlimited data, 100 email accounts. So this is like one-stop shop to throw your bad stuff there. And it's going to cost you $5. Going, oh, so this hosting provider, because it's so inexpensive, is a haven for malicious activity, because the threat actors can afford this and utilize all of this nice services to be able to go out and do bad things. Okay. And you can see that they have all these different things, email hosting, cloud hosting. And I was just like, wow, this is pretty scary. And if they're using that just a subdomain off of the main one, you might not know if it's good or bad, but as an organization, I would take anything coming from here and say, no one can communicate to it in my organization. I would just block it all together and be done with it. And then take their IP range too and say, we're blocking all this as well. Surely the EU can take action versus these bad hosting providers. I would hope so, but haven't seen it happen yet. Okay. Hasn't occurred in my time frame of doing this. So what I did was I said, okay, I went through some of these and started to look at them to say which ones, what do I see? And I started to find out that they're actually going against particular American companies. So for example, this one, if I went in and looked at the host pairs, you start to see back in 2019, they were going after Chase, this particular one, Chase Bank. And this one, what's the date on this one? June 20th, 2019. So this was back in June. Okay, so this domain back in June went against Chase. Then I went through and looked at another one. And it's still up. And I went through and it was associated with Chase as well. Okay, back in 2019. Okay, so I'm looking again, and now it's no longer up. It's not available, but it was at that point. So as I went through and I started looking at the host pairs, I started to see these patterns of badness happening. Okay, and so I said, well, can I just look at the hosting provider as an organization and take a look to see what other things have already been associated that people have reported on that reported this domain, okay, this coming from this site, okay? Now, these sometimes are transitory where somebody has done something, they might have compromised these machines. So when we go through and we look at the evidence or look at the information that we see, it doesn't mean that potentially that the threat actor purchased this. It could have been that there was a vulnerability in place that allowed the threat actor to take over or temporarily put bad content there that was then served up, okay? So when we go through and we look at this, it doesn't mean that the cheap provider is doing bad or hosting bad, but they might make an environment where it's very easy for a bad person to do bad things. So just bear that in mind, okay? Doesn't mean that I'm calling them bad or anything's bad with them, but it could be that there's an environment that these threat actors are leveraging to do their bad stuff. Okay. So I went through and I did a search for that provider. Okay. So I took this name, okay, and I searched for it. So let me bring that up. I think it's this one. Okay. So I will paste this particular one into the chat for everyone to see. Okay, so this is their attack surface. So this is everything that's publicly available, visible from the outside world, our view of how this looks like. So from this, we understand, some vulnerabilities that exist there that are either critical, high, medium, or low. We understand the number of hosts that we've seen, the different hosting providers, the number of IP addresses, the web technologies that are running in that environment, the different versions of PHP that we've seen. If they're in Amazon, if they're using Cloudflare, DigitalOcean, Google, Azure, all these things are listed here. But what I want to get into is looking at the vulnerabilities and exposure section. So when we start to look at this, this means that a domain or an IP address associated with this hosting provider, there was either an article talking about a vulnerability that exists or talking about a threat actor that they have. So we start to look in here, there's a skimmer one that was mentioned, Ocean Lotus, MageCart. And so you can start seeing all of these articles that are being published that links to infrastructure that is in their environment, either a domain hosted there, their domain or an IP address that either talked about a vulnerability or talked about an attack, like North Korean remote access Trojan. So that if we took a look at this article, okay, let's take a look. It talked about 71 different public indicators, and there's a bunch of IPs, a bunch of URLs, and some domains in there. But if we went back and I right-clicked and we take a look, we can see which ones were associated with that. So we can go through, and that article would be linked and say, hey, these vulnerabilities that were expressed in that article say, hey, if you have these things, you could potentially be associated with it. We're associated with that domain. Okay, so it could be that there's the vulnerability associated with it or threat infrastructure that was called out in the article. So I just want to bear that in mind. So Mike, am I talking correct? Or do you need to correct me at all?
So far, so good.
Okay, I want to make sure that the legal people will be happy with my explanations, but I will not get in trouble. So I want to go through and look at that attack surface some more. Okay, so as we go through, the sensitive services, because we're looking at each IP address and we understand the ports and banners that are available there, we know which ones are running FTP, which ones have SSH, which ones have VNC set up, and so on and so forth. So for example, if I went to VNC, if I right-clicked and opened on that, this will give me the list of all of the machines that have VNC set up in that environment. And if I show the information here, you'll notice that, hey, we see that VNC is running there. And if I right-click on that IP, I can drill into that IP address, and then I should be able to look at the services and look at the services and see right now OpenSSH, Apache, and this other service is listed there. So over the last 24 hours, we only see these things open, but we actually grab the banners. So we actually have the banner information as well. And a combination of the banner and what's running and their domain names, we can actually fingerprint these people and say, for example, oh, there was a typo every time that this threat actor put this out there. That typo exists on all of these banners in the world. That exact phrase or thing, we can link those together as well. So we're able to really fingerprint things and understand. If we go back to the main list, where is it here? And we scroll down some more, I can look down here at this IP reputation. So what it's doing is looking at the hosting provider, and from that hosting provider, looking at their IP ranges that they're associated with, and seeing if anything bad was happening. So if you notice, there's scanners, there's DDoS, there's remote access exploit, there's credential harvesting, command and control, abuse, web server exploits, and attacks. So if I went through and looked at, let's say, a scanner, I can bring up that list and it will show it to me. And then if I drill into one of them, we can see that additional information, and that will come up and say, hey, it's been blocked by a third party. There was a data plane SSH client. They're doing a scanner. So you can kind of start to see that we understand what's happening in the world with all the different sites and how those link together, and how a threat actor, if you're just looking at tactics, techniques, and procedures, it's not really telling you where they are, what's happening. But because we have this map of the internet, we have it all mapped out, and we can say, your organization is made up to this part. The third parties that you rely upon to do your business are this way, and this is your relationship. But then we can also look at the bad guy and say, oh, this threat actor is here, and this is what we see. But because we're grouping these together, we can start to see where they're congregating, what services they're using that might be shared across threat actors. So tooling, for example, might be involved. And you can say, this particular site is renting out fish kits for people. And we can say, oh, all these different threat actors are using this site to be able to do their campaigns because they're trying to save money and to obfuscate who's really doing it. So we can actually find these things and link them together for you. Okay. So this gives you that capability of complete understanding of what's happening. And so what I had done was, if we take a look at the different ones that are listed, I also did this other one, mail.ru. Okay. So if we take a look at this, I'll paste this one in as well. And Barrett, not Barrett, Mike, did you pick a winner yet for the?
We have drawn a winner, and
Okay.
I sent you in the chat. So whenever you're ready.
You want to say it?
Sure. We have the winner here is Lisa V. And
Awesome.
we will reach out to you with your prize.
Congratulations. So this other one I found was one where I saw a lot of other suspicious and malicious activity coming from. And so if you can look, there's command and control, there's scanners, there's credential harvesting. It's associated with Dark Crystal Rat, Dark Watchman, Emotet. So you start to see these things linking together. So I just wanted to have those two as hosting providers to show. But generally, most hosting providers are going to have some bad stuff in their environment. It's just the nature of the game. And it's not that necessarily that they're renting services to bad people. It might be that things aren't patched. So the previous one that we looked at, if we looked at the things that were had bad things out there, like WordPress vulnerabilities, there's over 9,000 things out there, domains and IPs. So if they're not patched and they're vulnerable to compromise, they can easily be compromised and then leveraged in an attack. So that's the other thing that as an industry, to make the world a safer place, we need to make sure that if we're leveraging or using any of these types of services, that we make sure that those providers are enforcing patch management and keeping things updated to prevent some of these sites from being attacked. And so that should be something that that we really force service providers to do, to say, if you want to be online, you need to make sure your stuff's up to date. If it's not up to date, can't be online, because that's the only way that we're going to really start to make a dent in this. Now, are there any questions on any of the stuff that I showed so far? Do you like this example so far? Yes, like the example. Okay, so I have one other one. I don't have this in my notes. We have a little bit of time, but if you're using organizations' services and it's a large organization, you're going to have a bullseye in your back. People are going to try to go after you. So one of the things that I recently came across, one of the global black belts that are part of our organization showed me was something that was pretty cool. And it involved looking at phish attack that was happening against iCloud. And one of the things that they found that was fascinating was in the actual Whois record, the threat actor put a fake Chinese city in there. And because of that, you can search and you can find all the domains that were associated with this attack that they're doing this phish attack from. And so I thought it was pretty fascinating, even though GDPR is there, because they used a fake city, that city became a unique identifier to find all of it. So inside of here, if you look at the host pairs, and I'll paste this in so you can do it. So I went to iCloud, and we'll walk through this, and then you can start to see some of these things. It was pretty fascinating. So looking at these host pairs, I wanted to go start to find loginfindus.com. So let me find that one. Here. So this was from the list. There was one in that list. And from here, started to go through and kind of look to say, okay, this one was in Mexico, but there was a name associated with it, an email address. And when you started to go through and look at these names, you started to see a little pattern. And it was amazing to start to see this type of stuff and going, this person is going after in phishing, iCloud services or other types of things to kind of pretend like it's associated with it. And they've been blocked, but you can start to see going back through February through March, all of these are bad. So some of them haven't been tagged as being bad, but they should also all be blocked. So went through and we started to look at, looking at the telephone numbers, the email addresses associated with it, and starting to find all of these patterns. I couldn't find the person online. I tried, I couldn't find them. And then I found another one that was only up for a couple days. And let me see if this is the one that had the Chinese. No, this is the same one. Okay. Oh, here we go. So we found out that there was a particular city that doesn't exist when you go look for it on Google Maps or Google Earth to try to find this. But as I went through, started to find out that all these iOS and Apple ones, they're all bad. And it's attack that's happening where the person that's buying these domains or registering these domains is using the same city. And it was pretty obvious just by searching on some of these WHOIS records that generally I gave up hope of these being fruitful in my investigations because of GDPR, but I'm finding these nuggets every once in a while where somebody will do something that's unique. And when you do it, you find all of this other information. So here's the other one that everything in this list pretty much is bad. And you can notice that they bought all of these the same time. So this is like a big campaign, first seen. So they bought a bunch of these and put them online. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So if you went through and you wanted to see like how they look like, let me see if I can get one real quick. Let's see if this one. Probably not online anymore, but let's see. Nope, it's not online anymore. So some of these have been taken off, but went through the list and I'm still doing this. So this will probably be an investigation in the future once I map it all out. But this was something I've just started with that I thought it was pretty interesting to find these nuggets of data that's a unique identifier that when you search for it, you're able then to link all this infrastructure together with a single pivot and understand all those relationships with different domains that are out there. So it's pretty cool. That's all the stuff that I have for today. I just want to make sure that everybody signs up and uses RiskIQ Illuminate for your organization to help you understand how you look like from the outside world, the vulnerabilities and exposures that you have, and then be able to understand what is good and what is bad to make the internet a safer place. So if you can, go out to community.riskiq.com, learn-more/illuminate, and from here you can create your own account. And if you use your organization's email, we'll create a attack surface for you to show how you look like from the outside world. We already have the map made, but we'll make that available to your email address, but we will only do it for your corporate emails. So if you have a Gmail or Hotmail or something like that, we're not going to show it to you. But if you do it, if you create your account with your corporate email, we'll do a couple things. We'll give you more visibility of data and more data sets. So we let you see the data sets plus a more period of time. If you use a free email provider, you're not vetted. So we only give you limited data sets and limited visibility. And then if you kick off the trial for Illuminate, that will activate your attack surface to be able to see your information. And if for some reason you don't see your attack surface, once you do that, you can go into the system and chat with us and let us know, and we'll kick that off for you and make it available. Dennis, anything that I need to mention before we're done for today?
No, great job, Ben. Way to explain it very well, and show relevant paths of doing threat hunting. If you're not doing threat hunting on events coming into your network, you're kind of blind to what potentially can hit you, and you've explained it very well.
Thank you.
So
yeah, so the big thing to think about is that things are happening all the time in the organization. Emails are coming in, people are surfing the web, all those types of things. And if you have the ability to take those types of logs and enrich them with the RiskIQ information to see, hey, were any of those suspicious or malicious? That's like that reputation score. Then you can immediately start to see, is there anything internally that maybe is slipped by that maybe one of my threat feeds that I purchased didn't know about, because our information is dynamic. It changes every day. So as our understanding of what's out there and the pieces that are suspicious, once we get enough, we call it malicious. So you'll notice how that changes over time. That will give you the ability to not only enrich the information in there, but you can take your threat intelligence that you've gathered or you looked at, like, so those lists of thousands of domains that we saw, I could take that list and apply it internally to see, did anybody communicate with those? And if they did, oh, now I need to go investigate those machines and see, is that an entry port for somebody to get in? Those are things that we demonstrated in the last workshop, but I wanted you to spend more time with hands-on doing the exercises and understanding that visibility that you'll get with this outside world to understand how that it can apply internally to your systems and your data. Yeah. So thank you very much. And I look forward to talking to you again. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. You can email us at support@riskiq.com. And we will get in contact with you and help you in your journey with cyber threat hunting. Thank you so much. Thank you, Barrett, Jackie, and Dennis, for all of your help today, and everybody that attended. This has been recorded. When we're done, in the next day or two, we'll be sending out to all the attendees a link to watch it. We'll throw it out on YouTube, but we'll also give you the link to the notebook that I did today, so you can have access to it, so you can take your journey with Jupyter further to be able to scale your investigations and make them repeatable.
And Lisa, we will reach out to you with your gift.
Thank you, everyone.
take care now.